Maya Chen stepped off the city bus and looked up at the huge building in front of her. Whitmore Academy stood like a castle from a fairy tale, with tall stone walls and big windows that sparkled in the morning sun. The school was so different from her own high school back home. This place looked like it cost more money than her family would ever see. She pulled her old backpack higher on her shoulder and walked toward the main entrance. The bag was heavy with her sheet music and a water bottle her mom had packed for her. Maya's hands were already sweating, even though the October air was cool and crisp. Other students were walking toward the same entrance, but they looked nothing like Maya. She watched a girl about her age get out of a shiny black car. The girl wore a perfect white dress and carried a leather bag that probably cost more than Maya's family spent on groceries in a month. Behind her, a man in a nice suit carried a violin case. Maya guessed he was her private music teacher. Maya looked down at her own clothes. She wore her best outfit, a simple blue dress her mom had bought at a discount store 2 years ago. The dress was clean and neat, but it looked cheap next to what everyone else was wearing. Maya felt her cheeks get warm with embarrassment. More cars pulled up to the school entrance. Each one was fancier than the last. Parents in expensive clothes walked with their children toward the building. Some kids had 2 or even 3 adults with them. Teachers, parents, and helpers all focused on making sure everything was perfect. Maya walked alone. She had taken 2 buses to get here, leaving her apartment at 6 in the morning. Her mom had wanted to come, but she could not take time off work. They needed every dollar from her job at the cleaning company. Maya's dad had left when she was little, so it was just Maya and her mom trying to make it work. As Maya got closer to the entrance, she heard other students talking. Their voices were confident and smooth. They used words that Maya had only read in books. They talked about summer trips to Europe and private music lessons that cost hundreds of dollars each week. "I just got back from studying piano in Vienna," one boy said to his friend. "My teacher there said I have real talent." "That's nice," his friend replied. "I spent the summer at a music camp in Switzerland. We played with some of the best young musicians in the world." Maya felt her stomach twist with worry. She had never been to any music camps. She had never studied with famous teachers. She had learned to play piano in the basement of her apartment building, on an old piano that was missing several keys and was always out of tune. The entrance to Whitmore Academy was crowded with students and parents. Maya stood at the edge of the group, not sure where to go or what to do. She opened her backpack and pulled out a piece of paper with information about the audition. The paper was already wrinkled from her nervous handling. "Excuse me," Maya said quietly to a woman in a fur coat. "Do you know where the music auditions are happening?" The woman looked Maya up and down with cold eyes. She did not answer Maya's question. Instead, she turned to the man next to her and said, "I hope they're not letting just anyone audition now. Standards used to mean something at schools like this." Maya felt her face turn red. She put the paper back in her bag and walked toward the building, hoping to find someone who would help her. Inside, the school was even more impressive than the outside. The floors were made of shiny marble and huge paintings hung on the walls. A chandelier bigger than Maya's bedroom hung from the high ceiling. Everything looked expensive and important. Students and parents filled the main hallway. Maya heard at least 3 different languages being spoken around her. These families came from all over the world, and they all had one thing in common: money. Maya found a sign that pointed toward the music department. She followed the arrow down a long hallway lined with photos of former students. All the faces in the pictures looked confident and successful. Maya wondered if any of them had ever felt as out of place as she did right now. The music department was in its own wing of the building. Maya could hear piano music coming from several different rooms. Some students were practicing, playing difficult pieces with perfect technique. Maya recognized some of the music, pieces she had only dreamed of playing well. She found the main audition room and saw a table where students were supposed to check in. A stern-looking woman sat behind the table with a list of names. Maya waited in line behind 3 other students, each one looking more prepared and confident than she felt. When it was Maya's turn, she stepped up to the table. "Hi, I'm Maya Chen. I'm here for the scholarship audition." The woman looked through her papers and found Maya's name. She looked up at Maya with surprise, as if she had not expected Maya to actually show up. "Maya Chen, yes. You're applying for the full scholarship program." The woman's voice made it sound like this was somehow wrong or unusual. "Yes, ma'am," Maya said politely. The woman handed Maya a number and pointed to a row of chairs against the wall. Wait there until your number is called. The auditions are running about 30 minutes behind schedule. Maya took her number, 47, and found an empty chair. She sat down and looked around the room. Other students sat with their parents talking quietly about their audition pieces. Some had professional-looking sheet music in expensive folders. Others had tablet computers with their music stored electronically. Maya opened her backpack and pulled out her music. The sheets were photocopied from library books and held together with a paperclip. Some of the pages were bent at the corners from being carried in her bag. She tried to smooth them out, but they still looked shabby compared to everyone else's music. A girl sitting nearby glanced at Maya's music and whispered something to her mother. They both looked at Maya and then looked away quickly, but Maya saw them trying not to laugh. Maya felt smaller and smaller as she waited. Everyone around her seemed to belong here. They knew how to act, what to wear, and how to talk. Maya felt like she was wearing a sign that said, "I don't belong here." But she stayed in her chair, holding tight to her music. She had worked too hard to give up now. Maya had been playing piano since she was 8 years old, teaching herself from books and videos she found online. She practiced every day after school in the basement of her apartment building, on that old broken piano that the landlord had left there years ago. Her music teacher at school had told her she had real talent. "Maya," she had said, "you could go far with the right training and opportunities." That's when Maya had learned about the scholarship program at Whitmore Academy. The scholarship would pay for everything: tuition, books, even meals. It would give Maya the chance to study with real professional teachers and to be around other serious musicians. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. Maya just had to prove that she deserved it. The audition room doors opened with a loud creak. A tall woman in a black suit walked out, her high heels clicking on the marble floor. Maya had never seen someone who looked so serious and cold. The woman's gray hair was pulled back tight, and her lips were pressed together in a thin line. She looked like she never smiled. "Students, please line up by number order," the woman announced. Her voice was sharp and commanding. "I am Headmistress Victoria Sterling. I will be reviewing your applications before your auditions begin." Maya felt her heart start beating faster. She had heard about Headmistress Sterling from her school music teacher. Everyone knew that Sterling was tough and did not like students who were not from wealthy families. Maya hoped the stories were not true. The students lined up as they were told. Maya found her place in line, number 47. She was near the back, which gave her time to watch what happened to the students in front of her. Maybe she could learn what to expect. One by one, students were called forward to a small table where Headmistress Sterling sat with their application files. Most meetings were short and pleasant. Sterling would smile at the wealthy-looking students and ask polite questions about their private teachers and music schools. "Wonderful to see you again, Amanda," Sterling said to a girl in an expensive dress. "How is your mother? Still on the hospital charity board?" "Yes, ma'am." "She sends her regards," Amanda replied with confidence. "Excellent. And I see here you've been studying with Professor Martinez at the conservatory. He's one of our finest alumni." "Yes, ma'am. He speaks very highly of Whitmore Academy." Sterling smiled warmly. "Well, I'm sure you'll do wonderfully today." Next, Maya watched this pattern repeat over and over. Sterling was friendly and encouraging to students whose applications showed expensive schools, famous teachers, and important family connections. These students walked away from the table looking confident and relaxed. But Maya noticed something else. When Sterling came to students who looked like they might not be wealthy, her whole attitude changed. Her voice became colder. She asked harder questions. She looked at their applications like something smelled bad. A boy named Carlos went up to the table. His clothes were nice but not expensive. His application showed he went to a regular public school like Maya. Sterling barely looked up at Carlos. "I see you're applying for financial aid," she said, making it sound like a bad thing. "Yes, ma'am. My family hopes I can get some help with tuition," Carlos answered politely. Sterling flipped through his application quickly. "And where exactly do you study piano?" "At my school, ma'am. And I take some lessons at the community center." Sterling's eyebrows went up like she was surprised. "The community center?" She said it like Carlos had told her he learned piano in a garbage dump. "And who is your private teacher?" Carlos looked uncomfortable. "Well, I don't have a private teacher exactly. But Mrs. Rodriguez at the community center has been helping me for 3 years." Sterling wrote something on Carlos's file and closed it with a snap. "I see. Well, we'll call you when it's time." Her voice was dismissive and cold. Carlos walked away looking worried and upset. Maya felt sick to her stomach. If Sterling treated Carlos that way, what would she do to Maya? At least Carlos had some lessons at a community center. Maya had taught herself everything she knew. The line moved forward slowly. Maya watched Sterling continue her pattern of being kind to rich students and mean to everyone else. With each interaction, Maya felt more and more nervous. Finally, it was Maya's turn. She walked up to the table on shaking legs. Sterling was reading Maya's application file, and the expression on her face was already turning sour. "Maya Chen," Sterling said without looking up. She pronounced Maya's last name wrong, making it sound harsh and foreign. "Yes, ma'am," Maya said quietly. Sterling finally looked up at Maya. Her eyes moved from Maya's face down to her clothes and back up again. Maya felt like she was being examined under a microscope. "I see here that you attend Lincoln High School." Sterling said this like it was a disease. "That's a public school, is it not?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you're applying for a full scholarship." Again, Sterling made it sound like Maya was asking for something she had no right to want. "Yes, ma'am. My family doesn't have much money, but I really love music and—" Sterling held up her hand to stop Maya from talking. "I can see that from your application. Tell me, Miss Chen, who is your private piano teacher?" Maya felt her cheeks get hot. "I don't have a private teacher, ma'am." Sterling's eyebrows shot up. "No private teacher? Then where do you study piano?" "I taught myself mostly, and my school music teacher helps me sometimes." Sterling actually laughed, but it was not a nice laugh. It was the kind of laugh people make when they think something is ridiculous. "You taught yourself? How interesting." Maya could tell from Sterling's tone that she did not think it was interesting at all. She thought it was a joke. "And where do you practice this self-taught piano playing?" Sterling asked, still smirking. "In the basement of my apartment building. There's an old piano there that—" Sterling laughed again, louder this time. A few other people in the room turned to look. Maya felt her face burning with shame. "An old piano in a basement," Sterling repeated, shaking her head. "Miss Chen, do you have any idea what level of musical training our students have received? These young people have studied with master teachers, attended prestigious summer programs, and performed in concert halls around the world." Maya nodded, not trusting her voice to work properly. Sterling continued, her voice getting colder. "They have invested tens of thousands of dollars in their musical education. They come from families who understand and appreciate fine music. They know how to conduct themselves in refined society." Each word felt like a slap to Maya. She wanted to disappear. "Now," Sterling said, looking back at Maya's application. "It says here you plan to play a piece by Rachmaninoff for your audition. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am. Piano Concerto No. 2. Sterling's mouth dropped open in shock. Then she started laughing again, even harder than before. This time, several parents and students turned to see what was so funny. "Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto?" Sterling said loud enough for others to hear. "One of the most difficult pieces in the classical piano repertoire? You think you can play that?" Maya nodded, though she was starting to feel dizzy from embarrassment. "Miss Chen, that piece requires years of advanced training with master teachers. It requires an understanding of musical interpretation that comes from studying the great classical tradition. It requires technical skills that take decades to develop." Sterling looked around the room as if she wanted to make sure everyone was listening. "You're telling me that you learned this piece by yourself in a basement on a broken piano?" "Yes, ma'am," Maya whispered. Sterling laughed so hard that tears came to her eyes. Other people in the room started chuckling too. Maya heard whispers and saw people pointing at her. "Oh, my dear child," Sterling said, wiping her eyes. "You have no idea what you're attempting. Rachmaninoff is not something you learn from YouTube videos. It's not something you play on toy pianos in apartment basements." Maya felt tears starting to form in her own eyes, but she blinked them back. She would not cry in front of these people. Sterling closed Maya's file and looked at her with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Miss Chen, I think you've made a mistake coming here today. Whitmore Academy is for serious musicians from serious musical families. We're not a charity organization for children with unrealistic dreams." The words hit Maya like physical blows. Around the room, she could hear people whispering and giggling. She felt like everyone was staring at her, seeing her exactly the way Sterling saw her, as a poor girl who didn't belong. But something inside Maya refused to give up. She had come too far to quit now. I would still like to audition, please, Maya said as clearly as she could manage. Sterling sighed heavily like Maya was wasting everyone's time. Very well. But I warn you, Miss Chen, when you embarrass yourself up there, don't say I didn't try to save you from it. Number 47, you're next. Maya's heart stopped for a moment, then started beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. This was it. After all the waiting, all the embarrassment, all the cruel laughter, it was finally time. She stood up slowly, her legs feeling weak and shaky. Her sheet music trembled in her hands as she gathered her things. Around the room, she could feel eyes on her. The group of parents who had been making fun of her earlier had positioned themselves where they could get a good view of the audition room entrance. "Oh, look, here she comes," Maya heard Mrs. Worthington whisper loudly. "The little girl who thinks she's a concert pianist." More quiet laughter rippled through the group. Maya kept her eyes focused straight ahead, trying to ignore them. She walked toward the audition room entrance where a young man with a clipboard stood waiting. "Maya Chen?" he asked kindly. "Yes, sir," Maya managed to say. "Great, I'm David, the music department assistant." "Ready to go in?" Maya nodded, not trusting her voice to work properly. David opened the heavy wooden door to the audition room and Maya stepped inside. The audition room was smaller than she had expected, but somehow that made it feel even more intimidating. There was a beautiful black grand piano in the center of the room, much nicer than any piano Maya had ever played. The piano bench was made of polished wood and looked like it cost more than her family's entire living room set. 3 people sat at a table facing the piano. Maya recognized one of them as Professor Williams, the head of the music department. She had seen her picture on the school's website. The other 2 were music teachers Maya didn't know. But what made Maya's stomach drop was that the door to the audition room had been left slightly open. She could see part of the waiting area through the crack. Headmistress Sterling was standing right outside with her group of parents, clearly planning to listen to every note Maya played. "Miss Chen," Professor Williams said with a warm smile, "please come in and make yourself comfortable." Maya walked across the room, her footsteps echoing on the polished wooden floor. She had never been in such a fancy music room before. There were framed photos of famous musicians on the walls, and the ceiling was decorated with beautiful painted designs. "We understand you'll be playing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 today," said one of the other teachers, a middle-aged man with kind eyes. "That's quite an ambitious choice." Maya nodded and placed her sheet music on the piano's music stand. The pages looked even more shabby and worn in this elegant setting. She could hear whispering from outside the door, and she was pretty sure she caught the word ridiculous. "Take your time getting set up," Professor Williams said. "Adjust the bench height, arrange your music however you need it. There's no rush." Maya sat down at the piano bench and immediately realized it was too low for her. She had to figure out how to adjust it, which took longer than she wanted because her hands were shaking. Behind her, she could hear the teachers shuffling papers and talking quietly. Finally, Maya got the bench to the right height. She arranged her sheet music. Though she knew the piece so well, she probably didn't need it. She placed her hands on the keys for a moment, then pulled them back. The keys felt different from the old piano in her basement, smoother, more responsive. "Whenever you're ready, Miss Chen," Professor Williams said gently. Maya took a deep breath and tried to calm her racing heart. She could hear her own blood rushing in her ears. Outside the door, the whispering had stopped. Everyone was waiting to hear her play. She thought about Headmistress Sterling's cruel words. She thought about all the parents who had gathered to watch her fail. She thought about how they saw her, as a poor girl with impossible dreams, someone who didn't understand her place in the world. But then Maya thought about something else. She thought about the first time she had heard this concerto, sitting in her tiny apartment bedroom with headphones on, listening to a recording she had found online. The music had moved her to tears. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. She thought about the hours she had spent learning the piece, note by note, in that cramped basement with the broken piano. She thought about how she had worked through every difficult passage until her fingers bled. She thought about how the music felt when she played it, like she was telling a story that came from deep in her heart. Maya placed her hands on the keys again. This time she didn't pull them away. She closed her eyes and let herself remember why she loved this piece so much. The beginning was soft and gentle, like someone whispering a secret. Then it would build and grow, becoming more passionate and powerful, until it felt like the music was big enough to fill the whole world. Maya forgot about the fancy room. She forgot about the people watching her. She forgot about Headmistress Sterling and her cruel laughter. For just a moment it was only Maya and the music. She began to play. The first notes came out soft and clear, exactly the way she had practiced them thousands of times. Maya's hands moved across the keys with confidence she didn't know she still had. The opening theme of the concerto filled the room, beautiful and haunting. Within seconds, Maya realized something amazing was happening. The grand piano responded to her touch in ways the basement piano never could. Every note came out pure and perfect. The instrument seemed to understand what she wanted to express, and it helped her say it. Behind her, Maya heard one of the teachers shift in his chair. The whispering from outside the door had stopped completely. The room was absolutely silent except for the music flowing from Maya's fingers. The piece moved into a more complex section, where both hands had to play intricate patterns at the same time. Maya had practiced this part more than any other, because it was the most technically difficult. Her fingers flew across the keys, hitting every note with precision and grace. Maya could feel something changing in the room. The quality of the silence behind her was different now. It wasn't the expectant silence of people waiting for her to mess up. It was the focused silence of people who were truly listening to music. She opened her eyes for a moment and glanced at her sheet music, but she didn't really need it. The notes were printed in her memory and in her heart. She knew exactly where the music was going, and her hands knew exactly how to get there. The concerto moved into one of its most emotional sections, where the melody soared over rolling accompaniment in the left hand. This was the part that had made Maya cry the first time she heard it. Now, as she played it, she felt those same emotions flowing through her fingers into the music. Maya had never played on such a beautiful piano before, and she had never played for people who really knew music. But somehow, instead of making her more nervous, it was making her play better than she ever had in her life. The piano was bringing out colors and emotions in the music that she had only imagined before. Behind her, she could hear someone's breathing change. One of the teachers made a very quiet sound, like a small gasp of surprise. Maya was completely lost in the music now. Her body swayed slightly as she played, moving with the rhythm and emotion of the piece. Her face showed every feeling the music expressed: joy, sadness, longing, triumph. The technical passages that Headmistress Sterling had said were impossible for someone like Maya flowed from her hands like water. Years of practice in that basement had built strength and skill in her fingers that even she hadn't fully understood until this moment. Outside the door, Maya could sense that more people had gathered to listen. The group of parents who had come to watch her fail were still there, but they weren't whispering anymore. They weren't laughing. They were standing completely still, listening to every note. Maya played on, pouring her whole heart into the music. This was her chance to show everyone who she really was. Not the poor girl they saw when they looked at her clothes or heard about her background, but the musician she had become through years of dedication and love for her art. The first movement of the concerto built toward its dramatic conclusion. Maya's hands moved with power and confidence, bringing out the full majesty of Rachmaninoff's composition. The piano sang under her touch, filling every corner of the room with glorious sound. And then, as the final notes of the first movement rang out, Maya realized something that made her smile even as she continued to play. Everyone in that room, the teachers, the parents, even Headmistress Sterling, had just discovered that they were completely wrong about her. Maya continued playing, moving into the second movement of the concerto. This part was slower and more gentle, like a beautiful sad song. Her fingers moved across the keys with perfect control, creating sounds so soft and sweet they seemed to float in the air. Behind her, Maya could hear that one of the teachers was barely breathing. Professor Williams had stopped shuffling her papers completely. The room was so quiet that Maya could hear her own heartbeat, but it wasn't nervous anymore. Now her heart was beating in time with the music. Through the crack in the door, Maya could see that even more people had gathered in the hallway. Word was spreading through the building that something special was happening in the audition room. Students who had finished their own auditions were staying to listen. Parents who had been talking about other things had stopped their conversations. Maya played a particularly difficult section, where the melody jumped from high notes to low notes very quickly. On the old basement piano, this part had always sounded choppy because some of the keys stuck. But on this beautiful grand piano, the melody flowed like silk. Maya felt like the instrument was helping her express emotions she had never been able to share before. The second movement had a part where the music became very personal and intimate, like someone telling their deepest secrets. Maya had always felt connected to this section, because it reminded her of sitting alone in that basement, playing music that no one else could hear. All those lonely hours of practice had taught her how to put real feeling into the notes. As she played this emotional section, Maya heard a sound that surprised her. Someone behind her was sniffling like they might be crying. Maya couldn't turn around to look, but she realized that her music was actually making someone feel something deep and real. Maya moved into the third movement, which was faster and more exciting. This was the part that showed off technical skill the most. Her hands had to move very quickly and hit a lot of notes in perfect sequence. Some pianists spent years just trying to learn this section, but Maya's hands knew exactly what to do. All those hours of slow practice, working through each measure until it was perfect, had built the music into her muscles and bones. Now the difficult passages felt as natural as walking or breathing. The music built higher and higher, becoming more and more intense. Maya's whole body was involved now, swaying with the rhythm, her arms moving gracefully as her hands danced across the keys. She looked like she was conducting an invisible orchestra while she played. Behind her, Maya heard a chair creak as someone leaned forward. One of the teachers whispered something very quietly to another, but Maya couldn't make out the words. She didn't need to. She could feel from the energy in the room that something had completely changed. Through the door, Maya could see Headmistress Sterling's face. The woman was standing frozen, staring into the audition room with her mouth slightly open. All the smugness and cruelty had disappeared from her expression. She looked shocked, confused, and maybe even a little afraid. Mrs. Worthington, the woman in the fur coat who had made fun of Maya earlier, was standing next to Sterling. She had her hand over her heart, and her eyes were wide with amazement. The man who had said his own son wouldn't dare attempt this piece was shaking his head in disbelief. Maya played through a section that required both hands to play completely different rhythms at the same time. It was like patting your head and rubbing your stomach, but 1,000 times harder. The left hand had to play steady, strong chords, while the right hand played a flowing, singing melody on top. This was the part that had taken Maya the longest to learn. She had spent months just working on getting her hands to move independently. She had practiced it so slowly that each note was like its own separate event. But now all that patient work paid off. Both hands moved perfectly together, creating layers of sound that filled the room with rich, complex music. Maya noticed that her sheet music was starting to slide off the piano's music stand, but she didn't need it anymore anyway. She knew every note of this piece by heart. The music was part of her now, as natural as her own thoughts and feelings. The concerto moved into one of its most beautiful sections, where the main theme returned but in a different key. This made the familiar melody sound both comforting and surprising at the same time. Maya played it with such warmth and expression that it felt like she was telling a story about someone coming home after a long, difficult journey. By now, Maya could sense that the entire music department had stopped whatever they were doing to listen. She could hear footsteps in the hallway as more people came to find out what was happening. Teachers from other departments, students, even maintenance workers were gathering outside the audition room. Maya had never had an audience this large before. In the basement, she had always played alone, with only her own ears to judge whether she was doing well. But instead of making her nervous, playing for all these people was making her feel more confident and free. She realized that music was meant to be shared, and sharing it was making the music itself more beautiful. The piece built toward its final climax, where all the themes and emotions came together in a glorious celebration. Maya's hands moved across the entire piano, from the lowest bass notes to the highest treble notes. The music filled every corner of the room and seemed to make the walls themselves vibrate with sound. Maya felt like she was flying. Every note came out exactly the way she had always imagined it should sound. Her technique was flawless, but more importantly, her heart was completely open. She wasn't just playing the notes that Rachmaninoff had written. She was expressing her own dreams, her own struggles, her own hope for the future. Behind her, Maya heard Professor Williams make a small sound of amazement. One of the other teachers was breathing heavily, like he had been holding his breath for minutes and just remembered he needed air. Through the door, Maya could see that Headmistress Sterling had put her hand to her forehead, like she was trying to understand something that didn't make sense. The group of parents who had gathered to watch Maya fail were now pressed against each other, trying to get closer to hear better. Maya approached the final section of the concerto, where the music became soft and gentle again before building to its triumphant conclusion. Her hands moved with perfect grace and control, drawing sounds from the piano that seemed almost magical. She could feel that everyone listening was completely captivated. The silence behind her was so complete that it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. No one wanted to make even the smallest sound that might interfere with the music. Maya had dreamed of this moment for years, but the reality was better than any dream. She wasn't just playing music, she was creating something beautiful and meaningful that touched people's hearts. All the hours of practice, all the struggles, all the doubt and fear had led to this perfect moment. As she played the final phrases of the concerto, Maya realized that she had just proven something important, not just to everyone listening, but to herself. She had shown that talent and dedication could overcome any obstacle. She had shown that it didn't matter where you came from or how much money your family had. What mattered was how much you loved something and how hard you were willing to work for it. The last notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 rang out in the audition room, pure and perfect and full of emotion. Maya held her hands on the keys for a moment after the sound faded, hardly believing what she had just accomplished. Then she lifted her hands and sat back on the bench, finally allowing herself to breathe normally again. Her heart was pounding, but now it was pounding with joy and pride instead of fear. The room behind her was completely silent. Through the door, she could see that the hallway was packed with people, all of them staring toward the audition room with expressions of amazement. Maya had just given the performance of her lifetime, and everyone knew it. The silence that filled the audition room after Maya finished playing was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It wasn't the uncomfortable silence of people who didn't know what to say. It wasn't the awkward silence of people who were embarrassed for her. It was the deep, breathless silence of people who had just witnessed something extraordinary and needed a moment to understand what they had heard. Maya sat at the piano bench, her hands still resting on the keys where the final notes had been played. She could feel her heart beating fast, but it was a good kind of fast, the way your heart beats after you've accomplished something amazing. Sweat had formed on her forehead during the more intense parts of the concerto, and she could feel it cooling now in the quiet room. Behind her, none of the three teachers moved or spoke. Maya could sense them sitting perfectly still, as if they were afraid that any movement might break the spell that her music had created. She wondered what they were thinking, but she didn't dare turn around to look at their faces yet. Through the crack in the door, Maya could see into the hallway where what looked like half the school had gathered to listen. Students, parents, teachers, and staff members stood frozen in place. Some of them had their mouths slightly open, like they had forgotten to close them while they were listening. Others had their hands pressed to their hearts as if the music had touched them in a place they hadn't expected. Headmistress Sterling stood directly in Maya's line of sight, but she looked like a completely different person than she had an hour ago. All the confidence and cruelty had drained out of her face, leaving her looking pale and confused. Her usually perfect posture had slumped slightly, and she was gripping the doorframe with one hand as if she needed support to stay standing. Mrs. Worthington, the woman in the fur coat who had laughed so cruelly at Maya earlier, was standing next to Sterling with tears running down her cheeks. She seemed unaware that she was crying, and she made no move to wipe the tears away. Her expensive makeup was starting to smudge, but she didn't seem to care. The man who had said his own son wouldn't dare attempt Rachmaninoff was staring at Maya like he was seeing a ghost. His face had gone completely white, and he kept shaking his head very slightly as if he couldn't believe what his ears had just told him. Maya slowly turned around on the piano bench to face the panel of teachers. Professor Williams was sitting with both hands pressed flat on the table in front of her, staring at Maya with wide eyes. The kind-looking, middle-aged teacher had his hand over his mouth, and Maya could see that his eyes were shiny with unshed tears. The third teacher, a younger woman Maya hadn't been introduced to, was leaning back in her chair with a look of complete amazement on her face. She kept glancing from Maya to the piano and back again, as if she couldn't quite connect the girl she was looking at with the incredible music she had just heard. The silence stretched on and on. Maya started to feel nervous again. Had she done something wrong? Had she made a mistake in the music that she hadn't noticed? Why wasn't anyone saying anything? She opened her mouth to speak, to ask if everything was okay, but no words came out. The silence in the room felt too important to break with ordinary talking. Maya looked down at her hands, which were still shaking slightly from the intensity of the performance. These hands, which Headmistress Sterling had mocked for learning music in a basement, had just played one of the most challenging pieces in the classical piano repertoire. They had done it beautifully, perfectly, with more emotion and skill than Maya had ever thought possible. In the hallway, people were starting to move again, but very slowly and quietly, like they were in a library or a church. Maya saw some of the students who had auditioned earlier in the day. They were looking at her with expressions she had never seen before. Not the pity or dismissal she was used to, but something that looked almost like awe. Maya noticed that some of the parents in the hallway were whispering to each other now, but their whispers were completely different from the cruel gossip she had heard before. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was respectful, amazed, even reverent. One parent, a woman Maya didn't recognize, was wiping tears from her eyes and saying something urgently to the person next to her. Another parent, a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit, was nodding his head slowly and looking at Maya like he was trying to memorize her face. Maya saw Carlos, the boy who had been treated rudely by Headmistress Sterling earlier. He was standing at the edge of the crowd in the hallway, and when he caught Maya's eye, he smiled at her and gave her a small thumbs up. His smile was warm and encouraging, with no trace of jealousy or resentment. It was the smile of someone who understood what it felt like to be underestimated, and who was genuinely happy to see another person prove the doubters wrong. Professor Williams finally moved. She picked up a pen from the table, but then just held it without writing anything. She looked at Maya, then at the piano, then back at Maya again. Her mouth opened as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. The younger teacher leaned forward and whispered something to Professor Williams, but Maya couldn't hear what it was. Professor Williams nodded slowly, still staring at Maya with that look of complete amazement. Maya realized that these teachers, who had probably heard thousands of student auditions over the years, had never heard anything quite like what she had just played. They were music professionals who knew the difference between good playing and great playing, between technical skill and true artistry. And their silence was telling her that what she had just done was something special. In the hallway, Maya noticed that even the maintenance worker who had been mopping the floors had stopped his work and was standing with his mop in his hand, looking toward the audition room with wonder. A security guard who must have been passing by had also stopped to listen and was now standing perfectly still with a look of surprise on his face. Maya had never been the center of attention like this before. At her old school, she was just another student, someone who played piano as a hobby. Her teachers were supportive, but they didn't have the training to recognize just how talented she really was. Here, surrounded by people who understood music at the highest level, Maya was finally being seen for who she truly was. Headmistress Sterling was still gripping the doorframe, but now Maya could see that her hands were shaking. The woman who had been so confident and cruel earlier now looked lost and frightened. Maya realized that Sterling was probably trying to figure out how she had been so completely wrong about someone. Maya looked back at her sheet music, which was still sitting on the piano's music stand. The worn, photocopied pages that had embarrassed her earlier now looked different. They were proof of all the work she had put in, all the hours of practice, all the love she had poured into learning this music. They weren't shabby, they were evidence of dedication. The silence was starting to feel less magical and more awkward. Maya wondered if she should say something or get up and leave, or ask the teachers what came next. But every time she thought about breaking the silence, it felt wrong. Everyone in the room seemed to need more time to process what they had just experienced. Maya thought about her mom, who was probably at work right now with no idea that her daughter had just given the performance of a lifetime. She thought about Mrs. Patterson, her school music teacher who had believed in Maya when no one else did. She thought about all the people who had helped her get to this moment, and she felt grateful for every single one of them. The silence continued, heavy with amazement and respect and the lingering beauty of Rachmaninoff's music. Maya sat at the piano bench, no longer the poor girl who didn't belong, but a true musician who had just proven that talent and heart could overcome any obstacle. And still no one spoke. The spell of silence was finally broken by Professor Williams. She stood up slowly from her chair, and Maya could see that her hands were shaking as she began to clap. The sound of her applause seemed loud in the quiet room, but it was gentle and respectful, not the quick, polite clapping that usually followed student auditions. The other two teachers immediately joined in, rising to their feet as they applauded. The middle-aged teacher with the kind eyes was nodding his head as he clapped, and Maya could see that he was genuinely moved by what he had heard. The applause from the three teachers seemed to give permission for everyone else to respond. Through the doorway, Maya watched as the crowd of people in the hallway began to clap as well. But this wasn't ordinary applause either. It was slow, deliberate, and filled with respect. Then Maya saw something that made her heart skip a beat. Professor Williams had tears streaming down her face as she applauded. The professional, composed music teacher was crying openly, not caring that others could see her emotional response. "My goodness," Professor Williams said, her voice thick with emotion. "My dear child, where on earth did you learn to play like that?" Maya felt her own eyes filling with tears at the kindness in the professor's voice. After hours of being treated like she didn't belong, someone was finally speaking to her with genuine warmth and respect. "I taught myself, ma'am," Maya said quietly. "Like I told Headmistress Sterling. I learned from books and videos mostly." The younger teacher made a small gasping sound. "You taught yourself Rachmaninoff's Second Concerto?" "The entire piece?" "Yes, ma'am. It took me about 2 years to learn it completely." Professor Williams sat back down heavily in her chair, shaking her head in amazement. 2 years to learn one of the most challenging pieces in the piano repertoire, with no formal training, no professional guidance. "Where did you practice?" asked the middle-aged teacher. "Do you have a piano at home?" Maya felt her cheeks get warm, remembering how people had laughed when she answered this question before. "There's an old piano in the basement of my apartment building. The landlord said I could use it as long as I didn't play too late at night." The three teachers exchanged looks of complete disbelief. "An old piano," the younger teacher repeated slowly. "In a basement?" "Yes, ma'am. It's not in very good shape. Some of the keys stick and it's never been tuned properly, but it was all I had." Professor Williams put her head in her hands for a moment, as if she was trying to process this information. When she looked up again, her eyes were bright with something that looked like excitement. "Maya," she said, using Maya's first name for the first time, "do you understand what you've just done? Do you have any idea how extraordinary your playing is?" Maya shook her head, not sure what to say. "I have been teaching music for 25 years, Professor Williams continued. I have heard students who have studied with the finest teachers in the world, students whose families have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on their musical education. And I can honestly say that I have never heard anyone your age play with the combination of technical skill and emotional depth that you just demonstrated." The middle-aged teacher nodded emphatically. "The musicality you showed in that performance, the way you shaped phrases, the way you brought out the emotional content of the piece, that's something that usually takes years of intensive study with master teachers to develop." "And your technique," added the younger teacher. "Those passages in the third movement that give professional pianists nightmares, you played them flawlessly as if they were simple scales." Maya felt overwhelmed by their praise. These were accomplished musicians, people who really knew what they were talking about. If they said her playing was special, it must be true. "But how?" Professor Williams asked, leaning forward intently. "How did you develop such sophisticated musical understanding with no formal training?" Maya thought about this question carefully. "I listened to recordings of the piece over and over," she said. "I found different versions online performed by famous pianists. I would listen to how each one interpreted certain passages, and then I would try to understand why they made the choices they did." The teachers were hanging on every word. "And I read about Rachmaninoff's life," Maya continued. "I learned about what was happening in his life when he wrote this concerto, what emotions he was trying to express. I tried to feel those same emotions when I played." "Remarkable," the middle-aged teacher murmured. "You developed your own curriculum in musical interpretation and history." "Maya," Professor Williams said gently, "can you tell us a bit about your background? Your family, your school?" Maya hesitated, remembering how badly it had gone when Headmistress Sterling had asked similar questions. But these teachers seemed genuinely interested, not judgmental. "My mom works as a cleaner," Maya said quietly. "She works for a company that cleans office buildings at night. We don't have much money, but she's always supported my music. She bought me a keyboard when I was little, even though we couldn't really afford it." "And your father?" asked the younger teacher gently. "He left when I was 7. It's just me and my mom." The teachers nodded sympathetically. "I go to Lincoln High School," Maya continued. "It's a public school across town. My music teacher there, Mrs. Patterson, is the one who told me about the scholarship program here. She said I was good enough to try for it, even though I wasn't sure I belonged in a place like this." "Mrs. Patterson was absolutely right," Professor Williams said firmly. "You don't just belong here, Maya. You're exactly the kind of student this scholarship program was designed for. Someone with extraordinary talent who just needs the right opportunities to flourish. Maya felt like she might start crying from relief and gratitude. Really? Really, all three teachers said almost at the same time. Through the doorway, Maya could see that the crowd in the hallway was still there, still listening to every word. But now their expressions were completely different from what she had seen earlier. Instead of mockery and dismissal, Maya saw respect, admiration, and even a little shame from some of the people who had been so cruel before. Headmistress Sterling was still standing by the door, but she looked like she wanted to disappear. Her face was pale and drawn, and she kept looking at Maya and then looking away quickly, as if she couldn't bear to meet her eyes. Mrs. Worthington, the woman in the fur coat, had stepped closer to the doorway. Her earlier tears had been replaced by a look of genuine amazement, and what might have been regret. "Professor Williams," came a voice from the hallway. Maya turned to see that it was Carlos, the boy who had been treated so rudely earlier. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to say that was the most beautiful music I've ever heard in my life." Other students began to speak up from the hallway. "It was incredible. I've never heard anything like it. That was better than professional concerts I've been to." Maya felt overwhelmed by the positive responses. These were the same people who had been whispering about her and laughing at her just a short time ago. Professor Williams smiled at the students in the hallway, then turned back to Maya. "Maya, I think you should know that word of your performance has already spread throughout the school." Everyone stopped what they were doing to listen. The middle-aged teacher chuckled. "I saw the kitchen staff come out of the cafeteria to hear what was happening. The secretaries left their desks. Even the groundskeeper came in from outside. Your music brought the entire school to a standstill," the younger teacher added. "That's not something that happens every day or even every year." Maya looked around at all the faces, in the audition room and in the hallway, that were now looking at her with respect and admiration. Just an hour ago, she had felt like the loneliest person in the world. Now she was surrounded by people who recognized and appreciated her talent. But there was one face that caught her attention more than the others. Headmistress Sterling had moved closer to the doorway, and Maya could see that the woman's expression had changed completely. The arrogance and cruelty were gone, replaced by something that looked like deep regret and maybe even shame. Maya realized that this moment was about more than just her own success. It was about proving that everyone deserves a chance, regardless of where they come from or how much money their family has. It was about showing that talent and dedication can emerge from the most unexpected places. And most importantly, it was about never letting anyone convince you that your dreams are too big or that you don't deserve to pursue them. 3 months later, Maya walked through the halls of Whitmore Academy with a confidence she never thought she would have. She was carrying her new leather music folder, a gift from Professor Williams, and heading to her advanced piano lesson with one of the most respected teachers in the country. The scholarship committee had not only offered Maya the full scholarship she had auditioned for, but they had created a special program just for her. She received private lessons, performance opportunities, and access to practice rooms with the finest pianos money could buy. The school had also arranged for her to study music theory and composition with visiting professors from famous conservatories. But perhaps the most important change was not in Maya's opportunities but in Whitmore Academy itself. 2 weeks after Maya's audition, Headmistress Sterling had called a special meeting for all staff and faculty. Maya had heard about it from Professor Williams, who told her what had happened with tears of pride in her eyes. "Maya," Sterling had told the assembled teachers and administrators, "I made a terrible mistake with a student recently. I let my prejudices and assumptions blind me to extraordinary talent. I judged a young person based on her appearance and background, instead of giving her the respect and opportunities she deserved." Sterling had gone on to announce new policies for the school. All auditions would now be conducted with more fairness and respect. No student would be dismissed or discouraged based on their family's financial situation or social status. The school would actively recruit talented students from diverse backgrounds and provide them with the support they needed to succeed. "We almost lost one of the most gifted musicians I have ever encountered," Sterling had said, "because I was too narrow-minded to see her potential. I will not let that happen again." Maya had been amazed to learn about these changes. She had never imagined that her audition would have such a big impact on the entire school. But the most meaningful moment had come a few days later, when Headmistress Sterling had asked to speak with Maya privately. Maya had been nervous about the meeting. not sure what to expect from the woman who had been so cruel to her. But when she entered Sterling's office, she found a person who looked completely different from the arrogant, dismissive woman she had met on audition day. "Maya," Sterling had said, her voice soft and humble, "I owe you the deepest apology. My behavior toward you was inexcusable. I let my own biases and prejudices make me treat you with cruelty and disrespect." Maya had been surprised by how sincere Sterling sounded. "I have been thinking about that day constantly," Sterling continued. "About how wrong I was, about how close I came to denying you the opportunity you deserved. Your performance didn't just show me your incredible talent. It showed me something ugly about myself that I need to change." Sterling had paused, clearly struggling with her emotions. "I want you to know that what you did that day changed me as a person, and changed this school for the better. Because of you, other talented young people will be treated with the respect and encouragement they deserve, regardless of their background." Maya had accepted Sterling's apology gracefully, but what impressed her most was that Sterling followed through with real changes in her behavior. The headmistress now made a point of getting to know students from all backgrounds personally. She attended their performances and celebrated their achievements. She became an advocate for students who might otherwise be overlooked. Maya's success had ripple effects throughout the music world as well. Word of the basement prodigy had spread quickly among music teachers and professional pianists. Maya began receiving invitations to perform at small concerts and competitions. Music schools that had never heard of her before were suddenly very interested in her future plans. 6 months after her audition, Maya performed with the city's Youth Symphony Orchestra, playing the same Rachmaninoff concerto that had changed her life. The concert hall was packed, and in the front row sat her mother wearing a new dress and crying tears of pride and joy. Also in the audience was Mrs. Patterson, Maya's old music teacher who had believed in her from the beginning. After the performance, Mrs. Patterson hugged Maya tightly and said, "I always knew you were special, but even I didn't know just how special." Professor Williams had arranged for several important music professionals to attend the concert. After Maya's performance, she was approached by representatives from prestigious music schools, offering her full scholarships for college. Recording company executives wanted to discuss possible recording contracts. Concert promoters talked about performance opportunities. But perhaps the most touching moment came when Maya saw a familiar face in the crowd after the concert. It was Carlos, the boy who had been treated rudely by Sterling on the same day as Maya's audition. He had also received a scholarship to Whitmore Academy, thanks to the new policies that Maya's success had inspired. "Maya," Carlos said, shaking her hand warmly, "thank you for showing all of us that we belong here too." Maya realized that her story was about more than just one girl's musical success. It was about changing people's minds about what talent looks like and where it can come from. It was about proving that dedication and passion matter more than privilege and wealth. 1 year after her audition, Maya was invited to perform at Carnegie Hall as part of a program highlighting young musicians from diverse backgrounds. The performance was sold out, and music critics wrote glowing reviews of her playing. In the audience that night were her mother, Professor Williams, Mrs. Patterson, and even Headmistress Sterling, who had become one of Maya's strongest supporters. Sterling had framed the program from Maya's first audition and kept it in her office as a reminder to always look beyond surface appearances to see the potential in every student. But the person Maya was most excited to have in the audience was her mom. After Maya's success at Whitmore Academy, her mother had been able to quit her night cleaning job and find work with better hours and pay. Maya's scholarship had lifted the financial pressure on their family and allowed them both to dream bigger dreams. As Maya took her bow on the stage of Carnegie Hall, she thought about the scared, nervous girl who had walked into Whitmore Academy just 1 year earlier. That girl had been mocked and dismissed by people who thought they knew better, but she had persevered because she believed in herself and in the beauty of music. Maya's story became an inspiration to young musicians everywhere, especially those who came from humble backgrounds like hers. Music schools began actively recruiting from public schools and community centers. Scholarship programs were expanded to reach more students who might otherwise never have the chance to develop their talents. The worn, photocopied sheet music that Maya had been embarrassed about on audition day was now displayed in a place of honor in Whitmore Academy's music department. It served as a reminder to everyone who saw it that talent and dedication are more important than expensive equipment or fancy presentation. Maya continued her studies at Whitmore Academy, where she was now one of the most celebrated students in the school's history. She also began teaching piano to younger students from backgrounds similar to her own, passing on not just musical skills, but also the confidence to pursue their dreams regardless of what others might say. 5 years later, Maya graduated from Whitmore Academy as valedictorian and went on to study at one of the world's most prestigious music conservatories. She continued to perform professionally, while also working to create opportunities for other young musicians from underserved communities. And she never forgot the lesson she had learned that day in the audition room: that the most beautiful music comes not from perfect technique or expensive training, but from a heart that refuses to give up on its dreams. Maya's story proved that sometimes the most extraordinary things come from the most ordinary places, and that true talent will always find a way to shine, no matter how many people try to dim its light. Her journey from a basement piano to Carnegie Hall showed the world that everyone deserves a chance to show what they can do, and that we should never judge people by where they come from, but by the dreams they carry in their hearts. The cruel laughter that had once tried to silence Maya's dreams had been transformed into applause that echoed around the world, inspiring countless others to believe in themselves and never give up on the music that lives inside them. 3 months later, Maya walked through the halls of Whitmore Academy with a confidence she never thought she would have. She was carrying her new leather music folder, a gift from Professor Williams, and heading to her advanced piano lesson with one of the most respected teachers in the country. The scholarship committee had not only offered Maya the full scholarship she had auditioned for, but they had created a special program just for her. She received private lessons, performance opportunities, and access to practice rooms with the finest pianos money could buy. The school had also arranged for her to study music theory and composition with visiting professors from famous conservatories. But perhaps the most important change was not in Maya's opportunities, but in Whitmore Academy itself. 2 weeks after Maya's audition, Headmistress Sterling had called a special meeting for all staff and faculty. Maya had heard about it from Professor Williams, who told her what had happened with tears of pride in her eyes. "Maya," Sterling had told the assembled teachers and administrators, "I made a terrible mistake with a student recently. I let my prejudices and assumptions blind me to extraordinary talent. I judged a young person based on her appearance and background instead of giving her the respect and opportunity she deserved." Sterling had gone on to announce new policies for the school. All auditions would now be conducted with more fairness and respect. No student would be dismissed or discouraged based on their family's financial situation or social status. The school would actively recruit talented students from diverse backgrounds and provide them with the support they needed to succeed. "We almost lost one of the most gifted musicians I've ever encountered," Sterling had said, "because I was too narrow-minded to see her potential. I will not let that happen again." Maya had been amazed to learn about these changes. She had never imagined that her audition would have such a big impact on the entire school. But the most meaningful moment had come a few days later, when Headmistress Sterling had asked to speak with Maya privately. Maya had been nervous about the meeting, not sure what to expect from the woman who had been so cruel to her. But when she entered Sterling's office, she found a person who looked completely different from the arrogant, dismissive woman she had met on audition day. "Maya," Sterling had said, her voice soft and humble, "I owe you the deepest apology. My behavior toward you was inexcusable. I let my own biases and prejudices make me treat you with cruelty and disrespect." Maya had been surprised by how sincere Sterling sounded. "I have been thinking about that day constantly," Sterling continued. "About how wrong I was. About how close I came to denying you the opportunity you deserved. Your performance didn't just show me your incredible talent, it showed me something ugly about myself that I need to change." Sterling had paused, clearly struggling with her emotions. "I want you to know that what you did that day changed me as a person, and changed this school for the better. Because of you, other talented young people will be treated with the respect and encouragement they deserve, regardless of their background." Maya had accepted Sterling's apology gracefully, but what impressed her most was that Sterling followed through with real changes in her behavior. The headmistress now made a point of getting to know students from all backgrounds personally. She attended their performances and celebrated their achievements. She became an advocate for students who might otherwise be overlooked. Maya's success had ripple effects throughout the music world as well. Word of the basement prodigy had spread quickly among music teachers and professional pianists. Maya began receiving invitations to perform at small concerts and competitions. Music schools that had never heard of her before were suddenly very interested in her future plans. 6 months after her audition, Maya performed with the city's Youth Symphony Orchestra, playing the same Rachmaninoff concerto that had changed her life. The concert hall was packed, and in the front row sat her mother, wearing a new dress and crying tears of pride and joy. Also in the audience was Mrs. Patterson, Maya's old music teacher who had believed in her from the beginning. After the performance, Mrs. Patterson hugged Maya tightly and said, "I always knew you were special, but even I didn't know just how special." Professor Williams had arranged for several important music professionals to attend the concert. After Maya's performance, she was approached by representatives from prestigious music schools offering her full scholarships for college. Recording company executives wanted to discuss possible recording contracts. Concert promoters talked about performance opportunities. But perhaps the most touching moment came when Maya saw a familiar face in the crowd after the concert. It was Carlos, the boy who had been treated rudely by Sterling on the same day as Maya's audition. He had also received a scholarship to Whitmore Academy, thanks to the new policies that Maya's success had inspired. "Maya," Carlos said, shaking her hand warmly, "thank you for showing all of us that we belong here too." Maya realized that her story was about more than just one girl's musical success. It was about changing people's minds about what talent looks like and where it can come from. It was about proving that dedication and passion matter more than privilege and wealth. 1 year after her audition, Maya was invited to perform at Carnegie Hall as part of a program highlighting young musicians from diverse backgrounds. The performance was sold out, and music critics wrote glowing reviews of her playing. In the audience that night were her mother, Professor Williams, Mrs. Patterson, and even Headmistress Sterling, who had become one of Maya's strongest supporters. Sterling had framed the program from Maya's first audition and kept it in her office as a reminder to always look beyond surface appearances to see the potential in every student. But the person Maya was most excited to have in the audience was her mom. After Maya's success at Whitmore Academy, her mother had been able to quit her night cleaning job and find work with better hours and pay. Maya's scholarship had lifted the financial pressure on their family and allowed them both to dream bigger dreams. As Maya took her bow on the stage of Carnegie Hall, she thought about the scared, nervous girl who had walked into Whitmore Academy just 1 year earlier. That girl had been mocked and dismissed by people who thought they knew better. But she had persevered because she believed in herself and in the beauty of music. Maya's story became an inspiration to young musicians everywhere, especially those who came from humble backgrounds like hers. Music schools began actively recruiting from public schools and community centers. Scholarship programs were expanded to reach more students who might otherwise never have the chance to develop their talents. The worn photocopied sheet music that Maya had been embarrassed about on audition day was now displayed in a place of honor in Whitmore Academy's music department. It served as a reminder to everyone who saw it that talent and dedication are more important than expensive equipment or fancy presentation. Maya continued her studies at Whitmore Academy, where she was now one of the most celebrated students in the school's history. She also began teaching piano to younger students from backgrounds similar to her own, passing on not just musical skills, but also the confidence to pursue their dreams, regardless of what others might say. 5 years later, Maya graduated from Whitmore Academy as valedictorian and went on to study at one of the world's most prestigious music conservatories. She continued to perform professionally, while also working to create opportunities for other young musicians from underserved communities. And she never forgot the lesson she had learned that day in the audition room: that the most beautiful music comes not from perfect technique or expensive training, but from a heart that refuses to give up on its dreams. Maya's story proved that sometimes the most extraordinary things come from the most ordinary places, and that true talent will always find a way to shine, no matter how many people try to dim its light. Her journey from a basement piano to Carnegie Hall showed the world that everyone deserves a chance to show what they can do, and that we should never judge people by where they come from, but by the dreams they carry in their hearts. The cruel laughter that had once tried to silence Maya's dreams had been transformed into applause that echoed around the world. inspiring countless others to believe in themselves and never give up on the music that lives inside them.